Natsia tightened her grip on the bat and tapped the squared off end on the ground. Sweating hard, she looked up at the bowler and squinted to keep the glare out of the noon sun out. The bowler was laughing at her. She wiped the sweat from her eyes to get a better look at him. It was her brother Bilal. The crowd behind her began chanting her name. Bilal's laughter ceased abruptly, and he threw the ball. Natsia swung hard. The pitch came in low, but the ball connected, and the crack of the bat reverberated throughout the field. She clutched the bat and ran toward the wicket, but her brother threw the ball to the wicket-keeper before she could reach it. She stopped short when she saw who had caught the ball. It was Abu. Her father punched the air with a fist and pointed at her. "You're out, Choti, you're out." The crowd began to rush the pitch, and Ahmad led the charge straight at her. Natsia dropped to the ground, covering her head with her hands. Their chanting swelled, and even though she pressed her palms against her ears, she couldn't block out the terrifying sounds. "You're out! Get out! You're out! Get out!" The yelling intensified as the crowd grew and was accompanied by the hard pounding of the cricket bats against the earth, thumping in angry rhythm whose beat rose high above the playing field. The thumping grew louder and louder until Natsia felt as though they were beating the bats against her head. Natsia awoke with a start, bumping her head against the bamboo side of the charpai. The door to the servant quarters was rattling, and the fervent banging continued. "Get up!" The door rattled again. She shook away the dream and rose unsteadily off the rickety bed, trying to keep from waking Isha. Halfway through the night, Amma had shaken her awake and demanded that she move the charpai into the servant quarters. The thumping came again. "I'm coming," she whispered. Natsia opened the door a crack and peered out. It was barely dawn, and the sky still held the bluish-gray hue of night. Shirzad stood glaring at her, his feet bare and his hair tousled. "What's got you up so early?" she mumbled. "Are you deaf? I've been banging on the door forever. You sleep like the dead in here." "Well, maybe you weren't knocking hard enough." She didn't think her dream was any of his business. "Was so." He crossed his arms and let his hands rest in his armpits. "Okay, maybe not. He told me not to wake your mother." Natsia rubbed her eyes and yawned. "Who told you that?" "Your Abu." "My Abu?" "He's outside the gate. He told me to come get you. So could you hurry up so I can get some sleep before Baji wakes up?" Fully alert now, Natsia hurried to the gate. Abu had probably come home, only to find his family gone and strangers sitting on their sofa. Malia must have given him the address to Seema's place. The next time she saw Malia, she'd have to remember to thank her for sending Abu to her. She lifted the lever carefully to keep the iron latch from squeaking, slid the lock back, pushed open the gate, and slipped onto the street. Her heart stilled when she saw her father. Abu rushed to wrap his arms around her, engulfing her small frame in the folds of his shirt. Natsia's feet left the ground and the sky whirled above her as he swung her around in his strong grip. She breathed in the sweat and stench of her father's filthy clothes, but she didn't care and clung to him tightly. He'd been gone only 3 days, but Natsia felt as if she'd trekked across the desert in his absence. "Natsia, Choti, I'm so glad to see you. Let me look at you." He cocked his head and smiled at her. "You've grown so much." Natsia giggled. "I have not." "Of course you have," he said in mock seriousness. "A child can grow into a woman in the blink of an eye." "Abu, I'm not a woman." Natsia stopped laughing. "And I don't want to be." "Okay, Beta. You'll always be my little Choti." He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her gently. "Now, stop being so serious. You look so much like your mother, you're frightening me." He let go of her and pretended to bite his dirt-encrusted fingernails. Natsia couldn't help but laugh at his antics. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed. She was certain, though, that it had to have been with Abu. She sighed. Even though she didn't want to end the silly moment, there were questions to ask and problems to solve. She froze his smiling face in her mind and locked it away for safekeeping. She watched his short mustache wiggle as he pretended to bite his nails. His teeth were straight, but deeply stained from the juice of betel leaves and roadside tea. The skin around his eyes crinkled up as he laughed, and his cheeks puffed out like baby potatoes. Natsia was surprised by the glimpse of Abu as he used to be before the accident, and she cherished the moment, glad that they were alone. "It won't be long before you go back to the village. I'll give you and Solomon a wedding the village will talk about for years to come." She inhaled deeply. Someone had to tell him. It might as well be her. There's not going to be a wedding, Natsia said. At least not with Solomon. Abu looked confused, and Natsia launched into the tale of her uncle's visit, the cancelled wedding, the eviction, and the search for a place to live. Shirzad came through the gate. Baji's coming! He disappeared again, but they could hear his voice as he tried to steer Seema back to the house. Abu grabbed Natsia's arms, and she bit back the wince as his fingernails dug into her flesh. Listen to me, Choti. We don't have much time. Gee, Abu. His face was solemn. I need to stay here with you. Do whatever you must to convince Baji to let me stay. Can you do that for me? Natsia nodded slowly. I'll ask her, but she already told Amma that if you or Bilal Bai come, she won't let you stay. That's where I need your help, Choti. You have to convince her. I have no place else to go. If everything is as you say, then I can't go back to Punjab until we have your dowry. I've spent all this time looking for work and found nothing. I need a place to rest and regain my strength to work again. But you are fine now, right? You said so yourself when you went to see Iqbal about the rent, and you aren't limping anymore. You are right, Choti. I am fine, but there's no work. Maybe your Baji or the Baji Sahib has something I can do here. A mali, a chowkidar, anything. Shirzad, the boy you met, does all the other work around here, including the gardening and the gatekeeping. I don't think there's any work for you here, Abu. His face fell and he looked away. From the other side of the wall, Shirzad's and Baji's voices were coming closer. But I'll ask the Baji, she said. Even if there isn't any work here, maybe you can still stay here, and the Sahib may have something. Who knows? I'm sure the Baji wouldn't want to split up a family. That's my girl. Now don't tell Amma that I asked you to do this for me. You know how upset she gets when she doesn't believe I've done enough. She cleans a few houses, pulls up my children out of school, and all of a sudden she thinks she's a man. Natsia ignored his sharp words and snaked her arms around his waist for a quick hug before hurrying back to the gate where she could hear the latch being lifted. Just as she was about to slip inside, Seema Baji stepped through the small gate and out onto the street. The Mem Sahib's gaze swung from Natsia to her father. Assalamu alaikum, she said in a haughty tone. Walaikum assalam, Natsia said carefully. Abu stepped forward to return the greeting. He alternately bowed his head and puffed out his chest in an effort to impress the rumpled Mem Sahib. Seema's camise was wrinkled and her shalwar clung to her legs. Her hair was tied up in a rubber band, accentuating the sagging skin and the lines of her face. She placed her hands on her hips. Who is this? Natsia smiled eagerly. Abu came to see us, to make sure we were okay. I see your leg is better now. Seema Baji bent down to pick up a bit of debris in front of her boundary wall. Shirzad was beside her immediately and snatched the trash from her fingers. Gee, Baji, Abu replied hastily. I've been all over Karachi searching for work. My legs ache like an old man's, so I thought I'd visit my family. Maybe rest here for the day, if you'll allow it. Baji, please, interjected Natsia. Isha and Mateen would cry their hearts out if they knew Abu came here and didn't even stay to see them. Please. Seema stared at her for a long moment, then abruptly turned and walked the length of her property alongside the road, picking up errant paper, plastic shopping bags blown up against the wall, and fallen leaves from a neighboring neem tree. Shirzad followed her every movement like a puppy, waiting with outstretched arms whenever she picked up another bit of trash. Finally she spoke. Nasim is very unhappy with you, she said to Abu. I know. Abu dropped his shoulders and stared at the ground. It's understandable, I suppose. Once a man loses a good job, it's hard to find another in this city. There's maybe one job for every 500 men. My weary feet say maybe worse. Seema gave him a sour look and shook her head. You men are all so much alike. Always an excuse. She wagged a finger at him. You have no job now because Nasim works. Your daughter works. You've tasted the money of a desperate mother, and now you've learned how to keep the water flowing. When the well runs dry, disappear. Nasim and Natsia will work harder. More water will come. You all know the game so well. I don't understand why Nasim bothers to share any of it with you. You are wrong, Baji. I'm not. Abu's not that way, Baji, Natsia cried. Seema shot Natsia a hard look. Don't you fall for your father's lies. He'll do anything to get someone on his side. You don't know him. Natia jutted her chin out. You only know Amma's story, not his. I know your engagement is over. I know you don't go to school. I know your mother works until she's near dead every day for you kids. All that is your father's fault. Natia's eyes filled with tears. Everything Seema was said was true, but did it mean that her father had to go away? That they would have to clean houses forever, or at least until someone decided to marry her? She stared at the Mem Sahib, realizing that if Abu left, she would never be a little girl again. A small cry escaped her lips, and she slapped a hand against her mouth, stifling the fear. Seema rubbed a hand on her back. Oh, fine. Don't say I didn't warn you. Hush. Stop your crying. She started toward the gate. He can stay for now, but there's no work here. Shirzad is more than enough for me. She turned to Abu. I'll check with the Sahib and see if he has any work. Now get in here. Natsia has work to do. Amma came toward the gate. Why did you let him in? Seema shrugged as she headed back inside. Your daughter. She begged me. Natsia pretended not to hear their exchange. She pulled her father inside, closing the gate door behind them. Why did Amma have to make a big commotion about everything? She'd settled it already, hadn't she? Don't close that gate, Amma shouted, pushing Natsia aside. She threw the latch open and tried to force Abu back out. Amma, what are you doing? Amma pounded Abu's chest. You let your own daughter beg for you? You don't care about her. You don't care about any of us. Natsia pulled at Amma, but it was Abu who easily held Amma at arm's length to keep from getting bombarded by her blows. Natsia squeezed herself between them. Stop it, both of you, stop it. Amma yanked her arms from Abu's grip and looked at Natsia, her chest heaving. You two deserve each other, both of you, nothing but dreamers. Natsia dropped her shoulders in dismay. Don't say that, Amma. Dreaming doesn't put food on the table or a roof over your head. Abu held out a hand and tried to smooth Amma's hair, but she swatted him away. Please, just listen to me, he said. I've been all over the city looking for work. I don't believe you. Amma's eyes were venomous. Natsia wrapped her arms around Amma. She whispered into the folds of her neck and her sweaty hair. Amma, give him another chance. Seema said she will ask the Sahib if he has work for him. He just needs another chance. He doesn't deserve another chance. Amma spat near his feet, but Natsia only tightened her grip. Just once. Finally, after a few minutes, when Amma's breathing became easier and her body sagged against Natsia, Amma relented. Fine, she muttered. Let the cowards stay. Amma pulled away and looked Natsia in the eye. But it will only be a matter of days before we'll regret it. Abu pulled them apart before Natsia could reply. He embraced them both, surrounding them with words of relief, nervous laughter, and a promise that he would work hard. Natsia wondered fleetingly if Amma was right, if they would regret letting Abu return so easily. She hoped not, but she couldn't dwell on it either, because the younger ones had heard Abu's voice in all the commotion. They came running, their innocent faces full of joy. Seema convinced the Sahib to employ Abu at one of his construction sites in the city. As an investment developer, he bought land in and around Karachi, erecting factories and plants. He also worked with architects to construct modern houses which Pakistanis returning from abroad and other countries' expatriates would prefer to live in. Amma had simmered for some time when she realized that Abu intended to stay at the servant quarters rather than find the family a real home. And why wouldn't he? Natsia had reasoned. There was no rent to pay, and the food was part of the deal, except for Abu, who had to buy his meals from the roadside stalls in Defense Market. Isha and Mateen were elated that Abu was nearby, and they no longer had to worry about their missing father. Abu went to the construction site every day and returned nightly. Amma and Natsia continued to clean the other two houses during the day and returned in the afternoons to Seema's place. Seema Baji had even given Isha and Mateen small duties around the house, such as watering the outdoor plants, weeding the garden, and sifting through rice and lentils. Amma had gotten Seema to let them clean out the adjacent room to make room for Abu, and Isha and Mateen made a game every night of choosing which room to sleep in.